وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والسولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والإبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الردوية والجود التقوية والنقابة النكبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When one examines the most common discussions within the modern world, you find that a discussion which often comes up in dialogue is what is the relationship between religion and science. Over here, you'll find that oftentimes there will be two groups who come forth and they present their views. One group, for example, will say that these two institutions are contradictory institutions, that the tenets and principles found in one of them does not necessarily agree with the tenets and principles found within the other. But on the other side, you'll find that there will be a second group that seeks to align everything within the religion from the principles of modern science. That if there is a verse about wudu, they'll say that what does modern science say about this verse? Or if there's a hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, they'll say that what does modern science say about such a hadith? Over here you find that those who have engaged in such discussions, they come from a variety of different backgrounds. For example, you'll have people who come from a background of scientific study, and you'll have people who come from a background of philosophical study, or you'll find people who come from a background of theological study. You see, this discussion is a discussion of relevance because one of the things which we seek to do within this holy month is that we seek to derive a worldview from the Quran and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Because in many ways, the month of Shahr Ramadan is a month of introspection and reflection. You see, each of these nights, we've been examining different concepts which are found within the famous sermon of Rasulullah, which introduces the month of Shahr Ramadan. But when you look within the sermon, you find that many of the concepts and themes found within the sermon refer to the realm of the unseen or the ghaib. For example, when the Prophet says that within Shahr Ramadan, the doors of paradise, abwabul jinan mufattahatun, that the doors of paradise are open, then this is a discussion which refers to the realm of the unseen and the ghaib. And if one doesn't have that proper worldview, then they won't be able to appreciate the realities of this month. That when we look at Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the greatness of Ahlul Bayt many a times revolved around the worldview of Ahlul Bayt. That when Amir al-Mu'mineen one day was upon the battlefield, and that man asked Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and he says to him that, "O Ali, that what does it mean for Allah to be one?" Imagine Amir al-Mu'mineen is in the middle of the battlefield and a man is coming and he is saying, "Ya Ali, explain to me Tawheed." At that moment, those who are around Amir al-Mu'mineen, they jump at that man. But Amir al-Mu'mineen replies by saying that let this individual ask this question. For what he wants right now is what we're desiring from the other group. In other words, every movement of the Imam was in the cause of Tawheed and the oneness of Allah. And the Imam, he explains the reality of Tawheed. So it serves us that what do we understand about how we understand the world and society around us? Because without a doubt, the way we understand the world is gonna have a profound practical impact in our lives. That if we understand the world to simply be a realm of physicality, then the goals of our lives will simply be materialistic. But if we recognize that there is a realm which is beyond this realm, then you find that it has an impact within our action. And this is why the subject of analysis tonight is to examine the concept of the ghaib and to understand that what is the relationship between modern science and religion. And we'll examine this discussion in the following stages. Number one, we'll examine that when it comes to the relationship between religion and science, what are the arguments presented by both groups? Number two, we'll examine that what is the concept of scientism and how can it be refuted? Number three, we'll examine that what does the Quran say about belief in the ghaib and unseen? And number four, we'll examine the important question that did Muhammad and Ali Muhammad have belief in the unseen? And what verses from the Holy Quran they prove this concept? Now when it comes to this discussion of the relationship between religion and science, as I alluded to in the introduction, we have two groups that have come forth. The first group that came forth is that group which said that religion and science are two contradictory realities. That what modern science is preaching is something which is dangerous to religion. You see, this group came forth as a reactionary measure because within the Muslim world, many of these ideas were being discussed, and at that time there was a group that felt threatened by these ideas. So the natural reaction that when you feel threatened is that you say that there is no relationship between the two. But when you look at the Holy Quran, you find the picture is a different picture. Yes, although modern science has certain philosophical suppositions which contradict religious tenets, the Quran time and time again emphasizes the use of reason and the intellect. For example, Allah in a verse will say, Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ard wa tasrifir riyahi wal fulki allati tajri fil bahr bima yanfa'un nas wa ma anzala Allahu minas sama'i min ma'in fa ahya bihil arda ba'da mawtiha. That Allah says that in the alteration of the day and the night, and in the changing of the winds, and in those ships which go upon the ocean by which you have benefit, and by the water that comes upon the ground, وَبَتَّ فِيهَا مِن كُلِّ دَابَّةٍ وَتَصْرِيفِ الرِّيَاحِ, that by the animals which He has spread upon this earth, and the changing of the winds, وَالصَّحَابِ الْمُسَخَّرْ بَيْنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. Allah says all of these different things, the clouds, the winds, all of these natural realities, all of these are signs, and these signs can only be understood by those who have intellect. You see, what is a sign? When you have any form of a sign, whether it's a red light or a stop sign, a sign is a visual entity which gives you a meaning. The moment you see that red stop sign, the meaning which comes in your mind is to stop at that moment, ideally. But Allah over here is saying that all of these things in nature, they are not an endpoint. All of them are a sign. That's why Imam Musa al-Kadhim, salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi, he would say that whatever you look at is a lesson. That person who's able to reflect by looking at all of these entities realizes there is a reality which is beyond these entities. And the Quran over here encourages the use of intellect and aql. You know, if the Quran felt threatened by the study of natural sciences, Allah wouldn't say utilize this intellect. You know, I'll give you an example that if there is a fake passport, a person with a fake passport would not go to a TSA officer and tell him that check my passport, scan it. Why? Because he has something to hide. But when a person doesn't have anything to hide or doesn't have to fear something, he will say it openly. And over here, Allah is openly saying that go and understand the natural phenomenon. So you find this first group said that these are two contradictory entities. This is something which contradicts the spirit of the Quran, and it contradicts the seerat of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. As an Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, that if I was given an opportunity to rule, I would judge the Christians by the Bible, and I would judge the Jews by the Torah, and I would judge the Muslims by the Quran, and those who didn't accept any deen, what would I judge them by? I would judge them by the aql and the intellect. So you find at one level, this is one group. But then there is a second group which is just as dangerous as the first group. That second group is that group which sought to align everything from the religion from modern science. In other words, when there was a discussion about wudu, they would say that what does modern science have to do with wudu? Over here, for example, we need to have a proper understanding of the Islamic framework. You see, when the Quran says utilize intellect, it doesn't say that every single realm is the realm of aql and intellect. When you look at all of those verses in the Quran which tell you where to use your intellect, for example, the Quran says, Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ard, that long verse which I gave you, that when it comes to all of these natural realities, understand them with the intellect. Because when you understand them with the intellect, you'll understand that there is a system and a nizam and they're interconnected, and via that system, there must be somebody who designed this system. The Quran says when it comes to understanding yourself, use your intellect to understand yourself. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. That we will show our signs in the horizons and within their own selves until they recognize that Allah is the truth. But at the same time, there are certain realms where the intellect, it falls short. And one of those realms, for example, is the realm of jurisprudence. Within the realm of fiqh, many people think it is as simple as that wudu is for cleanliness. If wudu was simply about outer cleanliness, then there are other ways to clean yourself with sanitation and other methods. And if it was simply about cleanliness, then why are we wiping the top of our foot and not the bottom of our foot? Even though rationally speaking, the bottom of our foot is what gets dirtier. But no, Ahlul Bayt said that although via aql and intellect you can recognize the need for a creator and the need for religion, and with the aql and the intellect you can recognize the need for a messenger and the need for wilaya and guardianship, but a point it comes that a person needs to put his intellect in subservience at the door of wahi and revelation. This is why Imam Zainul Abidin, in a famous tradition, he says, Inna deen Allah la yusabu bil uqul naqisah. That the religion of Allah, Allah's deen, cannot be understood by these deficient intellects. In other words, I'll give you an example. In the way the sight of an individual, their vision has a limitation, correct? I can see what's on this side of the wall with my vision, but I can't see what's on the other side of the wall. In the same way, the intellect has limitations as well. And there are many in the Muslim world who didn't understand this concept. There was an entire school of tafsir called tafsir ilmi, where they sought to align everything in the Quran by modern scientific analysis. Now, this isn't something which is wrong per se, but you find when you force this alignment, it becomes problematic. For example, Muhammad Abdo, a famous scholar in Egypt, when he interpreted the verses of Surah Al-Fil that, تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ, when it talks about the army of Abraha coming to destroy the Kaaba, and when it comes to destroy the Kaaba, it brings elephants with it in Surah Al-Fil, and the people they gather. And Abdul Muttalib goes to Abraha, and he says to Abraha, "O individual, on your way to destroy the Kaaba, you stole my camels. I want my camels back." And Abraha says that we are going to destroy your house of worship, and you are worried about your camels? That I thought you were a holy individual. Abraha replies by saying that house has an owner and a malik. And in the same way I am looking after my possessions, he will look after his possessions. You see, Muhammad Abdo, when he interpreted these events, he says when the Quran, it speaks about the pelting of the stones, this in reality is in reference to smallpox and this disease spreading. You see, there's a number of problems with such an interpretation. Number one, when a disease comes, does a disease look at who it's going to affect and who it doesn't? When this happened, this event and this punishment, it only affected the army of Abraha, not the army of those who were believers at that time. So you find such interpretations, they fall short and they have shortcomings in it. But when you want to understand the Quranic framework of knowledge and the role between religion and science, you find that there's one verse from Surah An-Nahl, which is chapter 16, verse 64. And that verse, it says that Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum, that Allah has brought you from the wombs of your mothers, la ta'lamuna shay'a. When you were brought forth, your reality was that you didn't know anything. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. But when Allah brought you forth and you knew nothing, He didn't leave you in such a state. He made for you the vision and the hearing and the hearts. Why? In order that you can thank Allah. You see, over here we find a framework that number one, you have these senses, sight, taste, hearing, all of these different things. But these senses have a limitation. After that, you have the realm of intellect. But in the same way, intellect has a limitation. But at the highest level, you have the realm of wahi and revelation. Because you know what is the fundamental difference between science and revelation? Science is based, modern science is based upon the principles of observation, experimentation, and making conclusion. Observation, experimentation, and conclusion making doesn't necessarily yield you certainty. But through the realm of revelation, you find a person is able to reach certainty when these rational principles are accepted. That's why when you look in the Muslim world, you find that those individuals who are engaging with science in the Muslim world were not having a crisis of faith like many individuals today. That when you look at an individual like Nasiruddin at-Tusi, when you go into a mathematics classroom, and in that classroom they have the different functions, cosine, tangent, all of these are the invention of Nasiruddin at-Tusi. Even upon the moon, you find that NASA, when they discovered a crater upon the moon, they called it the Tusi crater. Why? Because Tusi was an individual who went into the depths of the natural sciences. But although he had this on one side, on the other side, Tusi was also a jurist and a muhaddith and an individual who wrote one of the most important works of aqaid and belief called the Tajreed al-I'tiqad. You know, there's a story that if you want to understand the faith of Nasiruddin at-Tusi, there's a story that when he was being buried in Kadmain by Imam Musa al-Kadhim wa Imam al-Jawad alayhim as-salam. When he was being buried in Kadmain, Nasiruddin at-Tusi, he says that I am being buried by the Imam. Even when you go to Kadmain today for ziyarah, the grave of Tusi is on the women's side over there. He said that when you're burying me by the Imam, it is not proper adab and etiquette for my legs to be stretched out in front of the Imam. But at the second level, when you bury someone, the Shariat and the law doesn't allow for a person's legs to be bent when they're being buried. He says the solution is this, that after you bury me, write that verse from the Quran about the dog from Ashabul Kahf. That what does that verse say? That verse, it says, وَكَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَاعِهِ بِالْوَسِيدِ, and their dog lays in front of him with his arms and his forelimbs stretched out. So you see that this example, it goes to show an individual who brought both realms into reality. This is why when you look within the Quran, fundamental for one to hold on to their deen is for an individual to have belief in the unseen and the ghaib. That's why the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, right off the bat, after the Fatiha and the opening of the book, it says what? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif, Lam, Mim. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And what is the first sign of those who are God conscious? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. These individuals are those who believe in the ghaib and the unseen. You see, when you look in the Quran, there are two types of ghaib and unseen. The first of that unseen is that what is not in front of us, but we're able to understand it. In other words, the events of history are ghaib to us. We weren't there at that time period. And what is going on in the other part of the world is ghaib to us for the most part. We don't know what is going on over there. But we have the ability to understand that. The Quran says there is one type of ghaib that through natural means you're able to understand it. In the story of Yusuf, when Yusuf was thrown in prison by being accused of seducing the wife of the Aziz of Misr, the first thing Yusuf does when he comes out of prison is to make sure nobody says such an allegation. The verse of the Quran which describes the thought process of Yusuf states that the reason I want to do this, لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنِّي لَمْ أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ, so it is known that I did not betray my master, the Aziz of Misr, in the ghaib. Now the Quran uses the word ghaib and unseen over here, but this is a type of unseen that can be understood. But the Quran also says that there is a second type of unseen. The only way you can reach that is through the door of revelation. Allah says to the Prophet of God that these different stories that we tell you of the past people, تِلْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ, all of these are stories of the unseen. مَا كُنْتَ تَعْلَمُوهَا أَنْتَ وَلَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ هَذَا. Neither did you know this, nor did the people before you know this. We revealed it unto you. نَحْنُ نُحِيَ إِلَيْكَ. So you find that this level of the unseen comes through what? It comes through revelation. And you find at one level it is accessible to the regular human being as well. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq in a very profound tradition. Imam as-Sadiq in a very profound tradition, he says, Man amila bima alim, utiya ma lam ya'lam. You know what the Imam says? The Imam says that if you act upon that which you do know, that will be enough for you to know what you don't know. If you act upon that ilm which you have, Allah will give you knowledge that you don't have. And that goes to show that behind every single action in this physical world, there is a divine tawfiq and grace which a person needs. Oftentimes you look at individuals that through a very small act that they carry out in their life, it changes the course of their destiny through one act. That when Imam Al-Hussein, for example, is going towards Karbala, It's stated that Zuhair ibn al-Qayn wouldn't even stop to speak with the Imam, that they're going in the same direction. Imam al-Hussein stops on one side, Zuhair doesn't even want to see the Imam. But the Imam sends one of his servants to Zuhair, and he says that tells Zuhair that I want to see him. You know, history doesn't record what happened in that conversation. But what it stated that Zuhair, the moment he leaves that conversation with Sayyid al-Shuhada, Zuhair says that I am leaving my wife, I am leaving my children, all I see in front of me is Hussein. In other words, a person should realize that there are things which are far deeper than just this material realm. Oftentimes it takes one action for blessing to come into their life. And you find that many of the companions of Ahlul Bayt are those individuals who understood such a reality. And these are those individuals who went with Ahlul Bayt from Medina towards Karbala. You see, ulama have discussed that what was the most difficult moment in the history of the journey of Imam al-Hussein. One group of scholars said that it was the night before Ashura. Because on the night before Ashura, they had the realization everyone would be martyred tomorrow. Another group of scholars said, no, it was that night which we call Sham-e-Ghariba. But you know what the third group of scholars say? They say the most difficult moment was when Ahlul Bayt left Medina. You know, when Sayyid al-Shuhada left Medina, it's stated that that night before he leaves, he spends by the grave of his grandfather Rasulullah. And it's stated that the Imam, he falls asleep at that gravesite, and later he would narrate that I saw my grandfather within a dream. And my grandfather said, "O Hussein, there is a status that can't be attained except through martyrdom, O Hussein." What was the love of Rasulullah for Sayyid al-Shuhada? You know, Sheikh Jafar Shushtari would say that there are 4 parts upon the body of Imam al-Hussein that time and time again Rasulullah would kiss. He would say the first of those parts was the forehead of Sayyid al-Shuhada, that on the day of Ashura, an individual would throw a rock at the forehead of the Imam and it would begin to bleed. You know what Sheikh Jafar Shushtari says is the second part? He says the second part where Rasulullah would kiss was the neck of Hussein. That Rasulullah would know where that dagger would go towards. He would say that the third part Rasulullah would kiss is the chest of Hussein. That moment would come was Shimar jalisun ala sadr al-Hussein. Shimar would be sitting upon the chest of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But you know what Sheikh Ja'far Shushtari says? He says that final spot Rasulullah would kiss would be the lip of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Because upon the day of Ashura, you find when the Imam would be upon the ground, it would be stated that different individuals, they would take their spears, they would strike the face of the Imam, they would strike those lips where Rasulullah would kiss. But I say this is the departure from Medina. Right now as you're departing Medina, Ali Akbar is there, Abbas is there. But a day would come back when Ahlul Bayt would return to Medina. Imam al-Hussein wouldn't be there. Imam Zainul Abidin would say to Bashir that, "Oh Bashir, tell the people of Medina what has happened." Bashir would say, "Ya Ahla Yatrib, لا مقام لكم بها قتل الحسين فعدموا مرارو." That, O people of Yatrib, Hussein has been killed and the tears they fall for Abu Abdullah. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Ya Allah, we ask through the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they're sick and ailing, cure them. Ya Allah, give us the tawfiq to act upon the teachings of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Grant us the ziyarah of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Grant us the intercession and the shafa'ah of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. And allow us to see the reappearance of the 12th from Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. There's a request for Surah Al-Fatiha for Mirza Ronak Ali Beg, Ibn Mirza Muhammad Ali Beg, as well as for the rest of those individuals from your communities who are deceased, as well as for your own marhumin. Rahimallahu man qara'a Surat Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki yawmiddin Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. صلوا على محمد.